If you with it, drop it.
Hi everyone, welcome to another week of the Mantate Show. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about all things life. Anything that I find important, I'm gonna talk about it. So I'm very excited to be back again with another episode. If you haven't caught up on my past episodes, please go on YouTube, just look for the Mantate Show, or you can go on Instagram and look for the Mantate Show. There's a dedicated Instagram page, and then on the bio you can find the link to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe. If you subscribe, every time I drop a new video, you will be able to get an announcement. You can also look for me on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. I'm actually there, and also other podcasting platforms, but those are the main ones. And yeah, if you haven't caught up with the previous ones, please do that, because I've really discussed very important topics that might be useful to you or just someone around you. So the conversation for me is always, if it doesn't relate to you and it relates to someone else in your space, please pass it on to them, because the point is all of us learning from each other and being able to benefit, from each other's experiences and thoughts and ideas and things like that. So that's kind of like the departure point and the thinking behind every episode of my podcast. So I'm very excited this week, as usual. I feel like every week I'm excited about the topics that I bring to the table, but I'm very excited today because I'm talking about branding, and it's such a big conversation, and I feel like the way that I want to talk about it today kind of like stays within, the main conversations about it, but also brings in some aspects that I feel like need to be considered in this big conversation, because I feel like there is a way in which the branding that we are sold is a bit limiting to kind of like aspects of ourselves that we can brand, and how we can do that, things like language and messaging for who we want to be, how we want to interact with the world, and how we want the world to interact with us. So I wanted to talk about branding, and I'm talking about it from just like a layman perspective. I'm not talking about it as an expert of branding. I'm not talking about it from a marketing perspective or communication specialist perspective. I'm really just talking about it as a person that finds a lot of pleasure in kind of like sharing my story, in expressing myself, in living everyday life in a very loud, in a very expressive, energy-packed way. So I'm just sharing it from that perspective and thinking about, how do people like me brand ourselves? What exactly are we trying to brand, and are we even trying to brand ourselves? Because sometimes you think that people are branding themselves, but really people are just showing up every day and choosing to just be themselves. And if it comes out as a particular type of brand or pattern of ways of doing things, that's what it is. But it doesn't always mean that someone sits down and says, this is my brand, this is how I'm going to manage myself. And then there are some people that have brand managers and stuff like that, or brand advisors, and that's really powerful if they choose to go in that direction. I don't think it's for everybody. If you feel like that's what you want, you can pursue it if you have the resources, or if you've got a friend or whatever that's a creative person in some way, and then you're a particular brand and your collaboration benefits both of you. It could be another way that you can get someone to support you without having like a lot of money to hire a full-time brand manager. So I wanted to talk about it that way. Like, I wanted to be like an everyday person type of experience of branding. And I think even as I'm talking about the types, people that I am, the loud, the expressive, the everyday storyteller, but I also want you, even if you're not that kind of person, to really start to think about, okay, even if I'm not like Mantate or the kind of people that she was describing as similar to her, what are the ways that I can benefit from this conversation about branding? How do I begin to think about myself as a brand, even if I'm not like that out there, right? So that's kind of like the conversation I'm trying to have. It might be a little bit haphazard, because like I didn't really structure it in terms of like, I'm gonna talk about this first and all of those things. I feel like it will give itself a natural flow, and that's the vibe that I'm going with this week. And I just really want to start from the most important thing for me when it comes to branding. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is the idea that there are ways in which the way that we know branding, or the way that we've been told about branding, has a way of limiting us, right, in this sense. So normally when people think about branding, especially, as a person thinking outward to the people around you, society, and all those things, people think of brands in the sense of, when I'm looking for a job, what's someone going to say? If I'm looking for school, for a new place at school, whether to be a student, a postdoc, or whatever it is, what are people going to see? People are thinking, okay, in my church, what are they going to think? Or, those kind of things that people think about. There are specific places that people have in mind when they think about branding themselves. And I think that's very interesting as well, because a lot of that comes not from ourselves wanting to occupy certain spaces a certain way, but it also comes from the requirements, whether stated or not stated, of those particular spaces, right? For instance, there is always this big conversation about the language you use online, like the kind of things that you can say as you think about the kind of spaces that you want to occupy. Like, there are people that have not been able to travel to other countries because when they're applying for a visa, someone was told, okay, these things that you say that are harmful to other people that do not align with the principles of this country, so we're not giving you a visa based on that. Or I don't know, it's always, there's something like that, right? So it's, people think about those kind of things as they think about branding themselves and their messaging online. So it's again the point I'm making, that there's a requirement that, whether it's stated or not stated, that comes in to almost govern the way that you think about branding yourself, or the way that you decide to not brand yourself. Because also, you may not brand yourself, but you keep that in mind to say, okay, in as much as I'm not branding myself a certain way, I'm just going to be here remembering that this is kind of like the space I occupy. So it could be a visa application, could be your job. You want to work in a particular type of job, and there's all this, I don't know, conversations about anonymity of the space that you're going to be working at. So they look at how expressive you are, how you talk about work, and all those kind of things. So I really think that there's all those kind of things. It's like spaces of work that frame, who you decide to be online, because you're like, oh, when they ask me for my Twitter account or my Instagram account, whatever, I want them to be able to see that I align with their brand. It could be a school. I mean, it could be anything. I don't know if schools do that, but I'm just like, people think about those kind of things. So it's something that we need to think about as we depart in this conversation, right? And then the other thing as well, it could be people. Some people just look around them and then they see people that are in their field and the way that they're branding themselves, and then they use that as a guide to be like, okay, this is how I want to brand myself as well, especially for people that have done it in a way that seems to be successful and very helpful. So I would think that that's another thing that people think about when they're thinking about, okay, who do I decide to frame myself as? How do I decide to bring myself to the world, and how the world interacts with me? So that's another avenue. With this one, there are multiple things involved, right? I would say that you can take from somebody's experience. That is a very good thing. That's the point of life. We learn from each other in the same way that we are doing in this podcast, right? So it's this idea of when you look around and you see someone that's already in the space that you're trying to occupy, in a position you're trying to occupy, and then you think about, okay, this is what they're doing and I love how they do it and I want to do things that way. So you're not necessarily coming out to copy that person. But this is the point I'm making. You're not coming out to do that, because people try to do that. It's not really a good thing, right? It's you coming out to learn from that person, whether by watching what they share online, or checking out their website, or seeing how they go about expressing themselves, whether through conducting workshops, attending workshops, speaking at events. You look at that person do their thing and then decide, oh, okay, I'm seeing this works, okay, I'm good at this, it might actually align, so I'm gonna try this kind of things, right? But you're not necessarily replicating that person's life, because I feel like that's just gonna be weird, right? So think about it that way, that from each person you can learn a couple of things, and it may not all work for you, right? One of the things I mentioned earlier is that there's some people that are super outspoken, super extroverted, and then when you are like super chill, like you are introverted, or you're not as, you don't like talking, or you're scared of talking, whatever the case is. The point is, when you look at that person do their thing, the success of what you get from them is not based on your ability to be who they are exactly the way that they are, because already we've established that you're two different people, right? So if that person is expressive, they're extroverted, whatever, that's not you. So as you choose to engage with them, take from them the things that are practical to you as an introvert, or someone that's not so excited about, being out there and stuff like that. So I feel like we need to intentionally think about what we borrow from people. And also there's no harm in borrowing from multiple people. So you think about it this way, okay, there's this particular person in this field that I want to be, that I'm already in. And I want to be like them in the way that they speak, or in the way that, we respond in interviews, things like that. So you basically say, okay, I'm going to learn A, B, C, D from them. If they're accessible to you, you can reach out to them and ask for advice. If they're not, that's also okay. People don't owe you advice. People don't owe you a response. So even if you reach out to somebody and they choose not to respond to you, it doesn't make them a bad person. I just feel like people are not obliged to respond to you. And also people have their own things going on, so they can't, or they may not be able to stop for you. And that's not a bad thing, right? It just means we all have lives. And then the other thing is, once you're done like getting from this person, You can think about another person and say, oh, okay, this one is great at like responding to interviews this way, but this one, I love the way that they dress in like, you know, work, conferences, whatever. I just love their vibe in that way. I'm just gonna be looking at the way that they dress. You can think about someone else and say, oh, I like this person outside of work. I like the way that they travel. I love the way that they, you know, they like exploring arts. I like the way that they friendship. And then begin to think about, okay, I like how this person is, you know, is built around community, and I'm one person that thrives with community, but I'm not good at that. So how do I look at that person and see the ways that they socialize, they build their networks, and then use that to build my own network? So I think it's thinking about people as brands that we see around us and deciding what aspects of them we are borrowing into our own journey without trying to be that exact person. The thing about trying to be that exact person is the fact that when we wake up every day, we are ourselves, right? When we're done with our day, we are still ourselves, going back to our own space, right? And we're born, we exist in different places. So in as much as you want to be in the same profession, you don't have the same foundation, you don't have the same departures. So that already frames just how much of that person you can be like, right? So I think that it's very important to understand that, okay, I want to be like you, but I don't need to be you, because we have totally different departures, right? Totally different foundation, and that's okay. Even if you feel like you have something close with somebody else, like, oh, okay, looks like we have the same kind of departure. I believe that all of us are totally different people. Our experiences every day, I mean, we could have the same day, wake up in the morning, go to school, be in the same class, have the same kind of lunch, you know, be in the same library, social space, and then go home and sleep. But the truth of the matter is our experience of that day is totally different. And that's the thinking you need to have when you're thinking about people as brands and what you can copy from them. Think about it that way, that, okay, in as much as I might be experiencing the same thing, it's a totally different way of experiencing it. And it's also a different way of thinking about it. My way of thinking about that experience is totally different. My way of expressing myself in that space is different. So I think what this does also is it guards you, one, from copying somebody because you're not taking from one person. Number two, it allows you to see different things that are possible. It could be 5 people that are all amazing at interviews, but they're doing them differently. And then you see which one aligns best with you. I think the point for me is just understanding what is comfortable for you, understanding what is practical for you, and also being kind enough to yourself to say, okay, I'm not this person 100%, but I can get this, that's okay, right? So it's important. And if you can see, I'm starting from a place of what really drives the way that we think about our branding. Very, very important. Before you even start thinking about, okay, how do I brand myself? You need to have this kind of departures to say, okay, I like the way Mantate does school. I'ma look at the way she does school, and she talks about school, the kind of schools that she's going to, and I'ma explore that because, you know, we're similar in what we're studying or what we're passionate about. And then you might say, okay, I don't like her energy. She's got too much energy, or she's too expressive, or she's too extroverted. That's not my vibe. You can choose to do that. It doesn't mean that you don't like Mantate or you think Mantate is a terrible person. It just means that that's an aspect of Mantate that you're not, you know, vibing with, and that's really just comfortable. So I feel like that's very important. And then other people read books, yeah? So we already said some people design their brand based on the demands of the spaces they're trying to occupy or that they're keeping in mind for the future. Number 2, learning from other people, you know, by choosing selectively, intentionally, how you want to choose what they are or what you get from them. Number 3 is thinking about people that read books. There's people that genuinely read books on branding, right? Some people read, you know, news articles, they go online, they read different things that talk about branding. Some people go online on Instagram, on YouTube. Some people come to places like this, a podcast, and sit down to listen to what people say about branding. And that's the way that they think about branding. And that's why when I started, I said something very, very important that I need you to remember across this entire conversation. The fact that there is a way in which we're taught branding that might not be very helpful to everybody, and that's why we need to diversify the sources that are talking to us about branding. What that does is it allows us to see what is practical and what isn't. And what we're talking about today is kind of like a pushback on some of the, you know, I don't know, blanket ways of thinking about branding. And so thinking about, you know, do I read books? Do they help? Do I listen to a podcast? Do I watch something online or a movie that's, you know, spelling this out, or a documentary, whatever it is? You can do that. I think what's important as you choose all of those things is to remember, in the same spirit from when, you know, you're learning from somebody else, that there is no one size fits all, and one thing may not be like the perfect fit for you. So it could be a podcast and they say all those things, but they may not all work for you. But at least you come out with something, you choose what is useful for you, and you go with it. I mean, we could go on. Some of it could just come from self, right? A lot of it can come from just yourself and the way that you think about yourself, the way that, you know, you're passionate about certain things. So your branding then becomes based on the things that really just define you every day, the things you're passionate about, the things you show up for, the things that drive you. And I feel like in life, I mean, you may be in one place, but you can also be drawing from different things, right? So for instance, I could be drawing from my own energy. Like, I feel like my energy has a big, you know, influence on the person that I choose to be in various spaces and how I brand myself across these different aspects of myself. But it's not just, you know, my personal energy, because that energy is good, it does the job. But I've also seen other people that I like, and I'm like, okay, I like that, right? And also, what else? You know, there are things that I've read somewhere, you know, that have really inspired me. There is one statement that I love so much, and it's a statement that a friend of mine introduced me to, but it was this argument that when we as women decide not to tell our stories or to bring ourselves out there to express ourselves in our journeys, we deny young girls an opportunity to know what is possible, how it's done. And I feel like that's such a powerful thing, because like, I've always been that person. I'm the person that shares her journey. If I'm going to go to a new school, I'm going to tell you guys about it. If I'm doing a new job, I will tell you guys about it. If I'm doing a new project, I will tell you about it. If traveling to a new place, my vibe is I'm trying to give you a sense of, okay, this is life, this is how I'm doing it. It gives you a picture of what you can do if you're someone that's similar to me, you're coming from the same space, or even if we're not similar, but you know, you feel like there's things to learn or relate with me. It means that you're able to see, okay, I can actually do this kind of program, I can go to this school, I can do this job, those kind of things. So that's my vibe. So a lot of that comes from self and the way that I choose to brand myself, inspired by things like that. So that's a text that a friend of mine shared with me. So that's what I'm saying, like, it could be something you read that really reshapes, or you know, it kind of like reiterates the value of what, you know, you've chosen as a way of thinking about your own branding. So those are some of the ways, or the sources, or the inspirations, or the drivers behind the choice that people have to brand themselves and how they do that. But I also want to touch on the actual branding itself. I'm not going to go too heavy on it. I'll just tell you a little bit about the mainstream, because it's out there and you can go read or watch more podcasts about it. But the first thing that I want to say is, a lot of times when we're talked about branding, there is a tendency to look at it from okay, if you're going to be looking for a job, you need to make sure all your social media accounts are professionalized. You need this LinkedIn account that looks like, you know, a bot or a robot. There's specific ways that you're told, like, okay, when you go to events, this is the way that you interact with people, and you know, that aligns with your brand. So it's just like this way of, you know, governing the way that people decide to brand themselves. The reason why I'm very particular about this, and why I'm speaking back at it and pushing back a little bit on it, I feel like there's nothing wrong with all of these different elements that they highlight, very important. But I do feel like in a way it could limit you if you're a multifaceted person. There are people that are, you know, more than jobs. So there are certain jobs that really, like, people are defined by that. Someone is like, this is my whole life. So their entire personality and their entire life is built around the work and the profession that they're in. And so it's easy for them to brand themselves in that one particular way, because it kind of fits into everything else. And it's just this one space that they're in. But there are other people like me that are super, you know, like, we are like super diverse in the sense of there's different aspects of ourselves that really define us. I feel like I'm one of those people in this life who is defined by a lot of things, and all those things are very important to me. So there are things that, for instance, I do that relate to school that are totally different from, for instance, my fashion interest. There are things that I do that relate to travel that are totally different from, like, the work that I do in the professional space that I occupy. So for me, the conversation I have with myself when I think about, okay, who's Mantate to the world, it's a conversation of which aspects of myself am I choosing to give space. And as I give space to those things, that's the person that I'm choosing to, you know, to bring to you guys. So for instance, when it comes to my work, very passionate about, you know, the kind of work that I do. If you know me, you know, like, anything to do with governance, anything to do with leadership, women, you know, media. That's my vibe, that's my energy. Like, I want to be talking about, you know, human rights. I want to be talking about how women occupy spaces of governance. I like talking about youth leadership and youth issues. Those are the kind of things that I love. So in terms of the work that I do, it's centered around those things, right? But there's also Mantate on the other side that's very passionate about, school. And I like to separate my professional life from school. There's a lot of like ways in which they come together, but I like to kind of like separate the way that I share about these journeys, because I'm trying to build myself as an academic, right? There's a voice I'm trying to create that fits within this academic space that I occupy. But there's also Mantate the professional, and I'm very intentional about framing that journey in the development space that I'm passionate about, and I want them to show in a very distinct manner. So both are learning from each other, but they're very distinct, and I want that to pop. So my decision to brand myself professionally then is based on this two aspects, to say, okay, professionally, this is my job every other day. This is what I do, and I want that to come out to people. In this other way, I'm a student, and this is what I love to study. This is what I love to read. This is what I love to present on, talk about. That's the Mantate that I'm building as, as an academic. But there's also Mantate, the girl that loves dressing up, the fashion girl, the girl that likes, nice hair, dreadlocks, big afros. There's Mantate that likes, an eyeshadow, that likes a nice face bit. There's Mantate that likes to travel. There's Mantate that's passionate about all these different things. So there's that aspect of me, and it's an aspect of me that I find very important, because I feel like it fuels me. Like when I'm happy in all these aspects, the person that shows up for school is like 100%. The person that shows up for my work is 100%. So I give space to this aspect of myself. And the reason why I'm distinguishing, because there could be other extensions. There's Mantate, the entrepreneur, right? And thinking about the different things that I do in the entrepreneurship space that are not related to all these things, right? So for me, it's thinking about, there's all these different aspects of yourself. I mean, there's other things, but those ones are not as, as big as these ones. But there's core ones, right? So when I think about these things, I'm like, okay, in this world that I'm in, with this network that I have, not everybody is interested in all these aspects of me. And I need to be intentional about, right? So I think about it from a perspective of, okay, I have a very big network that exists across different parts of the world. And someone is excited about me and followed me, say on Twitter, on social media, like let's say on Instagram. I can't believe I say Twitter than social media. So on X, and then on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, there are people that follow us in different spaces. And they follow us because they interacted with an aspect of ourselves. And that's what drew them to us, right? What that means is, if someone came into my life because they're passionate about the work that I do and all of these different projects that I do in my work, what that means is when they come into my space where they choose to follow me, whether they're active on Facebook or Twitter or wherever else, it's them coming in to interact with that world that I've presented to them, that they connected with me on, right? So when they come in and they don't get to see that, they just see Mantate, the entrepreneur, or Mantate, the fashion girly. So they will think about, I don't see the connection. They might stay connected with you or following you, but I feel like it's such a disservice. You lose an opportunity to, broaden, that person's access to you, because you don't know what you can get from them. I really believe that there is a lot of things that people can bring into our lives that we get by virtue of us sharing our stories, and I've seen it in my life. So it's very important then to ensure that when that person comes into your life, you've got a space in your life that basically allows them access to that part of you that they've connected with. If they connected with you on aspects of travel, of fashion, of entrepreneurship, of school, let them be able to navigate your world and locate you, right? For some people, it could be that, for instance, there are people on Instagram who have this single account, right? But then they've got these different, things in their Instagram. For instance, in their highlights, they've got highlights that are specific to travel. They've got highlights that are specific to content creation. There's stuff specific to them traveling for school or just doing school. There's stuff relating to work. So it becomes a space where, okay, if I go there and I'm interested in their travel life, I'm just gonna click that, and that's what I'm gonna see. On Facebook, they might choose to do the same thing. When they post their pictures, they have folders where if you go to this album, you'll see information or posts about, this kind of things. But also, the spaces are very limited in a way. So it allows you to do that, but it also it's for people that can navigate that space or can choose to engage with this, these elements of you and still show up and follow you for these other random things that don't relate to why they're in your life. So I think about it that way, and it helps me a lot, right? Because, for instance, I have a podcast, this podcast that I hope you've subscribed to, right? I have this podcast, and this podcast has a dedicated Instagram account. And it has an Instagram account, and then when you go on my YouTube, you're definitely going to find my my podcast. So for my YouTube, it's not like multiple YouTube accounts, it's just like this one big YouTube account. But then you will find a place where my podcast is. If it's videos about travel, that's where you're going to find it, right? But on Instagram, I have a very dedicated page for this particular aspect of me. It's very, very important for me to distinguish, because I'm posting every other day with about all these other things. But I want people to follow my podcast, to engage with what I'm sharing there. There are things that I want to talk about that are specific to the space that I'm creating. And so when you go on my Instagram, you're just interacting with content that relates to that. I do have an Instagram account that's called Mantate Work. I need to post more on it, but it's the space where I share things related to my work. If I'm doing work or school, that's where you're gonna find Mantate. And then there's like the main Mantate account. This is like I say, my happy space. This has to do with Mantate as a traveler, Mantate as a creative person, like a fashion girly. Mantate's everyday vibe, basically. So if you're interested in that, that's kind of the space that you occupy. If you're interested in both that and my work, you can follow both of them. Or if you're just interested in my work, you follow that. If you're here for the podcast, follow that as well. So it can work that way if you're someone that can also manage, because I know that there's a lot of admin in this kind of setup. But that's because I love how I do things. I'm like, this is me project managing my life. I have a certain structure and it works for me, right? On Facebook, I have a professional page where I post about this podcast, about my work and things like that. Then I've got this old personal account that I've always had, where the community is people that I know, the network that I've built over time, and they know that I've got this professional account. So if you want to go to my page, you can just go there and follow my professional stuff, my podcast, my school and stuff. So Facebook, I only have 2 spaces, right? So the point I'm trying to get at here is there's space for you to brand yourself in different ways, in different spaces. What that means is Mantate can exist as a traveler, fashion girly in this one space. Mantate can exist as an academic or as a professional in a different space. And there are different ways. I mean, just choose whatever works for you. But I would say that do not be stuck with this traditional perspective of branding that says you need to be this one, like this one thing. You need to frame yourself in such a way that you fit into job requirements, or guys, I just feel like it's limiting you, because what about the other aspects of you that don't sit within, the requirements of that job? So for me, I think it's just this idea of how do you give space to the things that matter to you about you. So for me, that's kind of like the thinking that I have about branding. And then obviously branding takes place in different places. I know, like, in explaining this, I've kind of touched on the different ways I use things, like social media. Social media is another space where you brand yourself, right? And people choose to brand themselves in whatever way. I just feel like there shouldn't be too much rules about this, because then it becomes so rigid and it's no longer fun, right, to do. So I feel like you need to figure out what works for you and then just run with it. So the most important things to remember about branding, whether it's social media or other places, is 1, consistency. I just feel like you just need to be consistent, right? Consistent doesn't mean that there's no growth in your life, there's no change in your life. Change is inevitable, like you're definitely going to change. But I think the most important thing is, let's not be shocked. Like, if I see you today and I see you 6 months later, I'm like, who is this person? What is happening? And part of that is a conversation about when people come and follow you based on the particular kind of work that you do, you show a care for particular things that they're passionate about. And then 6 months later, you're abusing the very things that you said you care about. That's the conversation about consistency. So I feel like it's important to just sit down and be like, okay, what's the vibe that I'm going with? What's the language I use? What's the energy I'm driving? What do I care about? If I care about this, I need to care about it for long, especially if it's things of justice. Guys, you need to care about things and stick to that. You don't care about things just because it's a currency. It gives you, views and clicks for a particular moment. So you need to be consistent, but also understand that things change, views change. You might in 10 months decide, oh, okay, I wasn't very critical of this, or I should have framed this differently. I want to be better at understanding this kind of world and caring about it. But it shouldn't be that you're moving from caring about something and then suddenly you're like the worst enemy, especially if it has to do with harming people or things. I just feel like you need consistency. Either you care about things or you just don't. So don't be playing the games, because it's people involved. It's things that are important involved. So think about that as well, to say, in the way that you express yourself, just be consistent, right? Be consistent in your growth and your vision and the power that you carry. Show up every day in the consistency of how you express yourself. If I meet you in a conference and you're this person that's passionate about something, and then I go to your Instagram. If you said we connect there for work, or I go to your LinkedIn and then I'm just there and I'm like, you're the opposite of what you said, I feel like that's just like a terrible thing and a strange thing. So think about consistency, right? And then the other thing that you want to think about is language. I feel like for language, it's very important in the sense of you need to not kill yourself. Like, don't kill yourself. Don't try to remember, like all these, I don't know, big ways of doing things. I just feel like that's just too much stress. We're already stressed by other things like work, school, and our lives. So we have no room for other things that can be stressful. So I would say when you think about the language you use, I feel like for me, what is my guiding principle is as long as I do no harm to people. For me, I think the commitment is to not do any form of harm to people or things. Things relate to the environment as well, right? As long as I'm not creating a certain level of, I don't know, harm to the environment that I'm in, to the people around me, the people that I know and the people that I don't know, I feel like that's what governs the language that I use and the kind of, expression that I have. So for me, that's my guide. So you can choose to be guided by something else. Just make sure you have something that guides you. Having something that guides you means that you will be a better person in the way that you engage with things. In your anger, online and offline, there is a way that you engage with whatever is angering you that is not going to harm you or harm the people around you or the things around you. So I think having a certain guiding light, a guiding principle is very important because it helps you to frame even your messaging. For me, I feel like online, I'm just this person that's just super free. I'm just a free spirit. I'm living my life. And I feel like it's easier to stay true to that. I feel like for me, I don't struggle to be consistent because the vibe is just be authentic and just be yourself as long as you're guided by that value and care for not harming other people. So that's kind of like what I do. And I think it helps because then I don't have to overthink what I'm saying because I always know that what I'm saying is not going to harm someone. I'm not intentionally out here trying to harm people. If I say things and they come out as harmful, even if I didn't see them as harmful, I need to take accountability for that. So it's start thinking of if the principle is consistent, you're just going to be fine. But I think it's just you ensuring that you're guided by something. It's not just vibes, because if it's just vibes, you will say nonsense for clicks. You will say something today and then realize tomorrow, like, that was really messed up. I shouldn't have said that. And it could be harming somebody because you can come back and take it back. But it could have had that impact on somebody that's not reversible. So I would say, like, think about that as well. So I've talked about consistency, I've talked about language, and also I feel like just use branding platforms, play at your strength. Do not stress yourself about having all these things like a YouTube account, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. If you're not the person, don't be that person. Don't force yourself into things if you're not that person. Just find what's important. Things like LinkedIn are non-negotiable. Even if you're not a pro at it, just make sure you learn, go online and learn how other people are using it. Ask people around you that are using it, how they're using it. But I just feel like other things, like you don't have to have an Instagram, a TikTok, a YouTube, unless you're that person and you feel like you can manage it, do it. If you're not, just use a platform that you're comfortable with and then just work with it. There are people that have grown great or built very strong brands and they only have a Facebook page or Facebook account or a Twitter account and stuff like that. So I would say that think about it that way. Do not stretch yourself to brand yourself a certain way. Just do what works for you, do what's accessible to you, and just enjoy it. I think the goal is just enjoyment. If you do not enjoy your storytelling, then I don't know why you're telling us that story, because I feel like when you enjoy something, the way that you speak about yourself, the way that you express yourself, the way that you brand yourself, you can see in Jay like something that's being enjoyed and people begin to interact with that. Some people love it, some people hate it. I mean, that's just them. As long as you're enjoying it, it means that you're fulfilled in the way that you do it. So I would say that just be driven by this commitment to just enjoying the way that you're telling your story, and the platforms that you are telling your story in, because you're compatible with them, you enjoy using those platforms, and it's easier for you to kind of navigate it. So I would say, yeah, that's language, that's consistency, but also choosing the space that's comfortable for you. And then I think everything is learning. None of us were born able to do those things. So I would say that just give yourself that grace as you figure it out, especially LinkedIn. Most people have not used LinkedIn for a long time, or you created that account when you finished high school, but you realize now like I've not been using it in a useful way, and then you want to rebrand. That's allowed. I've done that before. I had an account that I created when I finished high school, and then I've had it for the longest time, and it had people, right? I had a lot of people that I was connected to, but I just felt like it wasn't spelling out the person that I was trying to be. It wasn't doing justice to what I was and what I was growing into. So I was like, okay, let's rebrand. So we sat down, and by we, I mean me and the committee inside my head, because there's like a whole committee in my head. So I sat down and decided, okay, this is how I'm going to tell my story on LinkedIn. And now I use it. I don't use it as much because your life is so much. I am busy right now. But I do use it here and there. And when I use it, there's a way that I use it. There's a language I use there that is different from the language I use, say, on Twitter or Instagram. So I would say that LinkedIn, give yourself grace, but make sure that you invest in a LinkedIn account. It helps you as well learn how to frame yourself. And also, even as you do a CV, for whatever it is, or you're doing cover letters and stuff, I feel like it does help you begin to, grow in the way that you speak about your work, your achievements, your academic journey, all the things that you're passionate about. So I feel like it's a good way of, practicing for when you tell people in a job setting what you've been doing and the impact that it has had. So I would say LinkedIn, make sure that you create space for you to meaningfully, have an account and also interact with people and build community. And then something that I wasn't going to talk about, but that I feel like is very important because I already mentioned LinkedIn, is when you go to events, right, and conferences, or when you meet people online, one of the most important things that you need to think about when you think about branding is how do you interact with people in ways that allow you to connect with those people beyond the spaces where you met them. So if I'm in a conference or workshop or whatever it is, and I meet new people and I'm talking about myself, I always talk about myself. And I always listen to people talk about themselves. So in the way that I do it, I'm like, okay, this person then tells me, like, this is what I do, this is the projects I'm working on, this is who I am. And then I'll be able to tell them who I am in ways that either relate to what they're doing, or in ways that I know, like, even if we're not connected in any way, if they were to leave the space and get into a space and there's an opportunity for someone like me, they would remember me. So part of branding is understanding what you tell people when you're in those different spaces. When you're in a conference, how do you introduce yourself? People talk about this elevator pitch when they talk about businesses. When you have a business idea and you meet the person that could invest in your business in an elevator, what would you do in a minute or 2 minutes? How would you tell that person about your business? So I think of it that way, to say, have this pitch. It's not practice, because I feel like anything rehearsed can become very robotic, right? But it's just thinking about, okay, if I'm in a conference and I meet someone from an organization that relates to what I'm passionate about, or from a school that's, either teaching or studying something that's similar to me or that I'm passionate about, how do I talk to them? What aspect of me am I sharing? Because it doesn't make sense to talk to that person about, I love fashion, or last week I was in this country, because I'm like, okay, what's the value to that person? How do I, harness the possibilities that are there, the potential that is there for, connections or collaboration? So it's very important for you to think about, if I'm in a space and I'm meeting people that relate to my work, what's the language I'm using? What aspects of me am I sharing? If it's a social event, it's a fashion space, whatever, what's the vibe that I'm going with? So it helps you a lot, because you don't waste time, because I feel like it's very important to respect people's time, but it means that you just hit the nail, weight matters, like what is what. So I feel like when you do that, it allows you to, ensure that someone remembers you. Because if you tell me 1,000 things and none of them stick, it means that there was no point in that interaction. I would say that just give people enough for them to remember you. If it's people that are connected to you in your work, in your passions, whatever, give them something that relates. If it's someone that's maybe not related, you can still talk about what you're passionate about or what you are interested in, or aspects of you that you feel like, okay, if they were to be in a space and remember me, I would want them to remember me for this. So those are things that you think about, because branding is not just about you on social media. It's also about, in the spaces that you go to, how do you build your network? How do you expand, the kind of people that occupy the space you're in? So I would think, in summary, if this can be a summary, this is kind of like the thinking I have about branding. I mean, this topic can be expanded. If you feel like I didn't cover some things, you can ask me a question in the comments. I will respond to you in the comments. But I feel like if you think about it this way, it will help you a lot, so that you relax and you're not under pressure. It will help you to enjoy this branding conversation. And also it will help you begin to think about, the ways that you've not been branding yourself enough. Maybe you've been limiting yourself. So how do you begin to expand that particular brand? And then as I close, the last thing I want to say is, we sit down and be like, what exactly is this whole branding thingy? What exactly am I trying to do? I think I've been saying it throughout, that when you think branding, you're thinking about, when someone hears the name Mantate, what do they think about, right? When someone sees you, what is it that they see, right? When someone speaks to you, what is it that they walk away with it? What do they think about you as they interact with you? What is it that's provoked in them? And then it shapes the way that they interact with you. So I think it's very, very important. And this is not a conversation about pleasing people. I feel like it's also important. Branding is not about fitting into people's expectations of who you need to be. Branding is about who you are, the purpose that you're serving, the life that you're living, the purpose that you're trying to, the creativity that you're expressing, and how you want to package it for the world. That's branding. It has nothing to do with people loving you or hating you. People will love, a good brand. People will love and hate whatever they want to love and hate. So I think when you focus it on what is it about me that I'm giving to the world, and how do I want to give it to the world, that's exactly what branding is. And that's why I keep talking about these different platforms, this language, this consistency, because it's generally just about you. It's about you sitting down and say, okay, who is Mantate? When you guys talk about Mantate, based on what I told you, what I share with you, what is it that you're going to say? So it's very, very important, because if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to tell your story. And if they tell your story, I'm not too sure they'll tell it the way that you want your story told. So I always think it's very important for you to just express yourself, enjoy that storytelling. And it does a lot of things for you. And that's something I'm not going to talk about today. But if you know me personally, you know that there's a lot of the growth that I've experienced that is shaped by the kind of person I chose to be around people, whether it's professional setting or social setting or my travel experiences. A lot of that is built around the person that I choose to be every other day. A lot of my growth is shaped by my personal expression of my journey, my purpose, and what I'm passionate about. And I love that for me. And I love the fact that I've really maintained this energy for a good 3 decades. And I feel like for me, the prayer is, may I never forget to share my story. May I never forget the value of the journey that I'm on. And may I never, forget to enjoy telling that story and telling that journey that I'm on, because I really love the life that God has given me. I'm grateful for it, whether it's the good and the crazy, but it's just this idea of a life that I feel like fulfills me. It's wholesome for me. And I feel like my branding is built around that. And it's an everyday expression of what God decided to be when He made me, and what He decides to be every other day as I exist, as a manifestation of His creativity, of His glory, of His purpose. So yeah, that's kind of like the conversation on branding. I hope this was very useful to you. I hope that you managed to learn a thing or two. I hope it gave you that this is how I think about it. I hope this was that for you. And like I said when I started, please subscribe to my podcast. On YouTube, it's the Mantate Show. If you go on my Instagram, just look for the Mantate Show, and then on my bio there's a link to my YouTube. And then you can also follow me on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and all these other podcasting platforms. So yeah, it's another week with your girl Mantate. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.